And we're back. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute with Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
Thanks, Scott. I am really looking forward to this podcast. CEO, CIO, CFO, all of these executives work in the C-suite, and many salespeople have no idea what it takes to get access to them, nor how to sell to this high-powered group. But if you can break through the barriers that hold you back and drive the right kind of meeting, you can achieve greatness as a salesperson. Today, Scott and I will discuss selling to the C-suite and much more on episode 414 of the Get in the Door podcast.
So today on our book club, we're going to be talking about chapter 11 from the book, The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David Schwartz. And the title of the chapter is How to Turn Defeat into Victory. And I think we deal with adversity every single day, Bill. In sales, it's such an emotional job. We struggle with putting our emotions out there. We're constantly seeking approval, which is kind of a weakness for salespeople to seek approval from prospects.
Yeah, we want to be liked.
We do, and we're trained to be liked when our goal should really be to earn their respect, to challenge them, because if we don't challenge them, we don't change them. And we're constantly risking ourselves out in the marketplace every single day, so we deal with defeat frequently. In fact, I think we probably deal with defeat more frequently than we do success. Is that a safe assessment?
Well, I think, when you look at all of the percentages or ratios we use to assess maybe prospecting, if you get 1 out of 10 that you get a meeting at, that's a good ratio, right? So,
well, that is, yeah.
Right. So if you can get half of your people to buy that you actually have a meeting with, that's a good ratio. So, yeah, I think that's a 95% failure rate.
Yeah,
right there.
That's worse than baseball.
That's right. I was thinking the same thing. Right. A great baseball player gets 40%.
Oh man, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I think one of the mistakes we can make is to only go for the sure thing. It can really hurt our sales to never be risking that failure.
I think it's small victories that we should probably seek. If you think about the movie Moneyball, what was the goal? The goal was to get on base.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about football, what is the goal? To get the first down, and you keep moving the ball down the field. And if you can just look at the short victories, then they add up over time to the big wins. But we need to really concentrate on the short victories. But we're going to be dealing with adversity, and there's some things I think that the author here, Dr. David Schwartz, is telling us to keep in mind. And some of the things that I took away from this chapter are failure is just feedback.
Mm-hmm.
It's not permanent. In the book, Cold Calling Reluctance, Understanding Cold Call Reluctance, they talk about what do salespeople really fear? They fear annihilation. And I assure you, nobody ever died making cold calls.
Right.
And when you think about the worst thing that could ever happen making a cold call, and what we fear most is dying, annihilation, it's never happened. I can't think of one case that it's ever happened where somebody died making cold calls.
That's right. They don't come through the phone and hurt you, right?
No.
So you're physically, you're never going to get hurt. So it must be an emotional thing, right? That we fear so much.
Definitely a conceptual barrier.
Yep.
And if we really debrief after every call that we make or every appointment that we have, we're going to be able to improve. If we don't debrief, we're going to repeat some of the mistakes and we're not going to recognize what worked, what the successes were. So celebrate the victories and work on improving the defeat and some of the mistakes that if we had a chance to do it over again, what would we do different?
Right. But don't celebrate the victory so much that you hate the defeats. And what I mean by that is, and I heard a sales speaker talk about this once, don't remember who it was, but he said, you've got to be pretty much a steady Eddie. And that is, you don't want what I have? Okay, great. You really love me and want an appointment? Okay, great. You don't love what I have? You don't love what I have? Okay, great. You can't get high and you can't get low. Just go through the process, appreciate those victories, but don't desire them so much that you hate the defeats and allow them to get you too low.
We probably need to even expect the setbacks, expect the defeat to happen, expect it to happen. Not that we want it to happen, but be prepared for it, because I really believe that how we handle failure is a good indicator of how we handle success.
Right.
If we can't overcome failure, we're never going to be successful.
Well, and that's what David says in the book. How do you respond to failure? Are you resilient or are you defeated? And the resilient person will get back up, not let it bother them so much, move on, and especially don't end in defeat, right? Keep going on so you can end with a good positive call, meeting, message, whatever that is at the end of the day.
And a failure, this is in the book, one of the lines that he says is, failure is a person who has not cashed in on the experience yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the word experiment and the word experience, and they're very similar. And there's got to be a Latin foundation to both of those words. And if anybody's a Latin major and they know, I'd really love to hear from you. If what a surprise to go from a Latin major to a salesperson. That would be quite a twist. You must have been struck by lightning.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm not sure Latin majors have a lot of other options, either the priesthood or going into sales at some point. Yeah. They're along with the people who were the sociology majors. I think we end up a lot of those in sales as well.
So
one of the things I wanted to talk about is that every successful person that you talk to will say, I was successful because I was willing to be defeated more often. I was willing to fail more often and accept that failure and move forward than other people. So Robert F. Kennedy said, only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. And I think that's important.
I think I know where somebody got the title of their book.
Oh, who is that?
Brene Brown. She does her Daring Greatly. And I'm like,
okay.
See that in there.
Okay, yeah. We should dare greatly, right? We should try hard things. And then the other thing in order to grow, he talked about, is you need to face your own faults. You need to look yourself squarely in the eye and say, what am I doing wrong that's not getting me the successes that I need? What can I do better? Where can I learn? I know that when I work with people who are trying to improve maybe their phone call or whatever, I ask them to practice on their own before we meet again, and very seldom do they do. Salespeople don't want to practice. They often don't want to do role playing, and then they have to do their role playing with a real customer.
This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by your hosts of Get in the Door podcast. Business is heating up, and now is the time to get back on the selling track. While others wait for the market to improve, prospects and opportunities await you now. Perhaps you want to be more productive on your prospecting, or you'd like to increase your closing percentage. Maybe having meetings online is not as comfortable as being in person. Sales reps are telling us they need some honest accountability and skill development to rise above the competition. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why the host of Get in the Door podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. For only $495, you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us your insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. After your 1-hour online session to jumpstart your coaching process, you will receive 5 more half-hour individual coaching sessions to enable you to make improvements over time and create new habits. Most salespeople make their money back with just one sale. Go to getinthedoorpodcast.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself and invest in your future. We want to tackle the final objection that we heard from Anita that sent us a bunch of objections. So this is the third episode that we've covered the objections, and we've got one more that's left. And the objection is budgets are maxed out.
And there's 100 ways to say that.
Yeah, there are.
We ain't got no money. We're not going to spend that much.
Yeah, right. We've already figured it out. And my position is, you have to break it down and look at two definitions. One is the budget. And I define a budget as a predetermined amount before a decision needs to be made. So they've come upon a number that they're going to allocate towards that before they ever need to make a decision, not even knowing what the impact of that decision is going to be, or the impact or the cost or the consequences, etc. So
yeah, but don't you think they have an idea of what they want to accomplish with that, right?
I don't know. I don't know if they know. I think it's something that they've made up and they're using based on a past experiences.
Okay.
Everything is based on the past, not the future. If a better way came up, would they want to be able to know about it?
Right.
So that's the definition of budget. I think as salespeople, we need to conceptualize the definition of budget before we can even deal with it.
So you're saying it's a guess.
It is a guess.
Yeah.
It is a guess. And then the second thing is money. Money is an instrument used to exchange value. So if there is a greater value, then people are probably willing to invest or spend, depending on what it is, more money because they're getting a greater value. Mm-hmm. So here's the response. Here's the script that I would use, and I've used this, and it's created more of a conversation. And that's the goal, is to still give them more consideration and more of a conversation for them to be able to understand the impact if they don't do something. So here it is. I understand you have made a plan based on past experiences. Many of my clients like to know what's going on in the marketplace and want to learn about better options available. The goal of my call or appointment is to share that option. Then you can decide what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think salespeople will find that when they meet a prospect for the first time, that prospects are very jovial and they're very welcoming, and they love salespeople sharing information. And salespeople love to be informational, because I would ask some salespeople, what is the goal of the first phone call? Well, I got to educate my customer. I got to educate my prospect. And I'm like, okay, what's the difference between educating and being influential? Well, there's where they struggle. Right. Is our goal is not to educate, our goal is to be influential. And then once we become influential, we're working with them to make a better decision based on the current marketplace. At some time, some point, some CFO decided we're not paying for long distance anymore. And it changed. Imagine that. I mean, we stopped paying for minutes. Now we have unlimited call plans on our cell phones. Something happened where we can't say, well, we've got a budget for that and we're going to spend it, or we got a budget for that and we can't afford to spend it. Something changed.
Yeah, I think I looked at more. You were looking at it, I think, from the sales call, trying to get into the appointment. I love your script that you've used, but I do think budget is a real thing. And so if we're talking to a client and they are looking for some kind of a solution, and they say, we do have a budget for this, I do think that that's a real thing. Once they've created the budget, they've created something in their mind that is real, even though you're saying it's kind of a guess. But I want to find out what their budget is. I like to talk about the ballpark number. Mm-hmm. And I'll ask them, I understand we've got an amount of money we want to spend on something. What's the ballpark number? And I don't want them to give me an exact budget, because they tend to be hesitant to do that. But if there's a really wide gap, if my solution is 100,000 and their budget is 10, I got a hell of a battle to get up to get their mind changed, no matter how much value I can bring to that. Now, maybe I can. Maybe they have absolutely no idea of what else is going on out there in the marketplace, and they're never going to find what they're looking for $10,000. And I have to start to probe them for what they've talked about and where they came up with that number. And perhaps I can create the value that $100,000 spend will. And I've sold that to other people. So I do know that that is a valuable, or that I have a good value proposition. But I need to dig into what that prospect values. If the only thing they value is price, they'll find somebody cheaper than me, and it's probably not worth my time. But if they're just confused, or they're just old-fashioned, or they just have no idea what they're talking about, and it is a total guess of that $10,000 budget, then I can have that conversation around that and show them my value. But I do think that budget can move, but how far can be up to question.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when they're willing to spend $10,000 and a real investment is $100,000, they're paying $10,000, and then later they're going to pay $100,000. So when it's all over with, they pay $110,000, and then they finally get it fixed.
Right. The old Fram oil filter, right? You can pay me now or you can pay me later, but you're going to pay for this because this is what it costs. We don't make up the price of our solution out of whole cloth. It's what the market assumes is valuable, or what the market values. And you're probably not going to find the right solution for that $10,000. So you're absolutely right. They are going to pay eventually for it. And that's our job in sales, is to show them how it's going to cost them more later versus doing it right the first time. Our next topic, and our main topic for this podcast, is selling to the C-suite. And the C-suite is where the biggest decisions are made in any organizations, right? The highest paid and most successful salespeople hold many or most of their meetings in those offices. but you've got some issues you've got to overcome. Gatekeepers are there to get you out of the appointment, and you have to get through the gatekeepers to get that appointment. And then when you get there, you've got to have something valuable to say, or you're never getting back again. So I want to talk about 3 areas, and Scott, you can jump in anywhere you want on there. One, I want to talk about getting the meeting. I want to talk about being prepared for the opportunity, and then having something to offer them when you get there. So getting the meeting, what are some of the keys to getting the meeting to the C-suite? Number 1, if you can get a referral, that's probably your fastest and most effective way to the C-suite. C-level executives talk to each other. They know each other, especially within an industry, and they are willing to trust the business advice from other C-level executives. So if you can get a referral, you're going to have a better chance of getting to that meeting. The second key might be to go where they are. So determine what kind of business or networking meetings or events that are attended by executives and go there. Now, don't sell them at the meeting, meet them and learn about the business. You're not going to do well by trying to convince somebody at an executive meeting that they ought to do business with you. They're not looking for that. They're looking to learn. So be creative. And then the final thing is, if you're making phone calls or sending emails or sending packages, be persistent and be creative. You're not going to get through to them on the first time. You're going to have to try and try again, but always have something to offer. And what you have to offer is ideas and solutions that are going to take their company forward. So first of all, you've got to get the meeting.
I think there's a lot of things in there, Bill, that you mentioned that LinkedIn can really be a great source of. And you and I are both fans of Joanne Funch and what she does when it comes to teaching people how to use LinkedIn. And if you haven't met Joanne or you haven't followed her, she's a great person to know when it comes to LinkedIn. So you can get a referral by looking at your LinkedIn network and see who's connected to your prospect that you want to reach. And it's possible that if you keep building your LinkedIn network, you're going to find somebody that knows somebody that can give you an introduction to the prospect that you want to meet.
That's right.
And also, go where they are. You mentioned there's interests that people share on LinkedIn, what groups they're following, or where they're seeking information, or where they're contributing information. You can follow some of those groups, and you can find out what they're participating in, and maybe you can submit some content there that they're looking for.
I think submitting that content is important because it identifies you with a level of expertise.
Yeah, it really does. Always those groups, you can always contribute and you can always learn. So look for 2 types of groups. Which group am I going to contribute to, and what group am I going to learn from? Mm-hmm. And then the last thing that you mentioned on being persistent, if you're sending something out and you're not going to follow up on it, you might as well throw it in the trash. Mm-hmm. If you're going to send out an envelope full of collateral information that your marketing department has created, and you're not going to schedule a follow-up call and 2 or 3 days after you mail that, just throw it in the trash, because you're going to get the same results.
Well, the funny thing is I find that so few of those things are opened that I quit sending them. And when I'd call, I'd just say, "Did you open the thing that I sent you?" And they go, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah.
Yeah. So I quit wasting the time sending them. I just told them I'd send it, and they'd say, "Well, it must be here on my desk somewhere." I'd say, "Oh, it's all right. Listen, here's what I wanted to talk about." And that was the end of whatever I was supposed to send. It saved me a lot on stamps and postage. And
well, that's one thing. It saves you money if you don't, if you're not going to send it. Another thing is you send an email, it doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
But if you're not going to follow up on it, don't send it. And
I have talked to people. I have talked to people, and you're right, Scott. I don't want to interrupt you, but what I've talked to with people is send them something, not just a letter that's going to get lost. Send them an unsharpened pencil in an envelope with a note that says, "Are your people this sharp?" Or "Can you sharpen your whatever," right? And something that they'll go, "Wow, this has got some tactile, this is not just a note. There's something I want to find out what's in here." And then they read your note, and it's creative enough to say, "This is interesting." And then you follow up, as you said.
Yeah, yeah. And Steve Cloyd had great, examples of that. Send him a nail or send him a padlock. He had other ones that I can't think of right now. But when you send an email, schedule a follow-up to that. And the reason for that is if you don't demonstrate your follow-up, you're not demonstrating your persistence. And if you don't demonstrate persistence, you're not demonstrating value. And if you don't demonstrate value, then there's no reason for them to buy from you. Because if this is how you treat them as a prospect, that's the same way that you're going to treat them as a customer or client, by not following up, by not treating them like they're important. And that's all they want to know, is that they're important, that they matter, that they're a priority. And prospects are wondering, if I'm being treated like this as a prospect, how am I going to be treated like a client? And you demonstrate your value by your actions in everything that you do.
How many executives have you finally gotten through to after 10, 11, 20 phone calls, and they said either, okay, I'll talk to you, because they're tired of getting your messages, or, hey, I was just waiting to see if you had any persistence?
Well, so I usually say, I figure out you're testing me. You're not calling me back because you're seeing how persistent I am, and you're testing me to see how many times I'm going to call you back and how often I'm going to think of you. And then when I do finally,
I'm thinking 100. I'm thinking 100. So either
I'm not that foolish. I am not that foolish. I will go to about 6 or 7, and then I say, I get the feeling that this is not of interest to you, or there's somebody else that's involved in doing it. And if I'm wrong, give me a call back. And if I don't hear from you, then I'll try another door. And then sometimes they'll call me back or send me an email that's saying,
sure,
thanks for your persistence. We're just not interested at the time, or we've got other things that are going on right now. And I have to be respectful of that. So at least I got through, I got a response. That's what I want, is a response. I would rather have somebody tell me no than give me the silent treatment.
Right. I can deal with a no.
Yeah.
All right, the second area we want to talk about is to be prepared for the opportunity. And that is, you've got to have some experience and knowledge about your business, your industry, and the competitors. You've got to bring value to the conversation, not just a catalog that they can pick something out of. So you got to know the business. You got to know their business and how your product or service integrates and solves problems for them. So you have to have some experience in that. And then finally, you have to be an executive, meaning you have to think like an executive. They want somebody who's experienced to partner with. I don't think the newbie should be going into the executive suite by themselves. Sometimes you've got to almost have that ownership or VP label in order to break into that executive suite. So don't make that your first week of phone calls is to the C-suite. Get that experience so you know what you're talking about and know their business and know your business.
I think a lot of that is based on the belief system that salespeople have. You have to believe that you have a cure for cancer and you're seeking out people who have cancer. I always ask myself, when I'm calling on a company, who has the most to lose? And when I work with salespeople and I know about their product or service or value proposition, and I ask them, who is going to lose the most if they don't buy from you? Who has impacted the greatest if they don't buy from you? And through that conversation, we work our way all the way up to a C-level, CEO or COO or CFO. And now we're really understanding the impact if somebody doesn't buy from us. And then we're understanding the value that we offer, and that gives salespeople greater confidence.
You're absolutely right. Many times it's the C-suite that can see the overall picture, and they're not looking at protecting their turf. You and I sell training. So quite often, if we talk to training departments, they don't necessarily want to make a decision because it looks like they can't do their job. Right. But if I talk to the sales leader, they don't care whether I train them or the training organization trains them. They want to get the results.
A good thing to keep in mind is that leadership defines culture. And a culture is what leadership is willing to tolerate. And when
what do you mean by that?
Leadership determines what excuses they're willing to buy from people, what they're willing to tolerate when it comes to behavior, what results and scorecards are acceptable at the end of the month. Mm-hmm. And leadership defines that. If leadership understands that they're creating a culture by what they're willing to tolerate, I think they're going to be a little bit more focused on the results that they're expecting and how they're communicating those expectations. And that really begins with leadership on communicating expectations within a sales team. Mm-hmm. And I always say, at the beginning of the month, if you don't make your number, I'm going to hear one of two things. I'm going to hear a reason why you didn't make it, or I'm going to hear an excuse on why you didn't make it.
So getting to that person who has the most to lose is what you're saying is crucial to making a sale. not to the person who's looking most to protect their territory.
Right. And salespeople need to think about that. So if they're looking at a solution and has the greatest impact on the C level, you got to talk to the C suite.
Right.
If you're switching uniform companies or office supplies or cleaning services, that may be made by somebody else, and you can make somebody else the hero by hiring you or buying from you, and they look better because they saved money, they got a better service, they got better value, they were able to accomplish more than they got before. It's not always on money. However, it's value and how somebody is able to buy from you and create and deliver more value to their employer or their company.
That takes me to the third area, that when you get in the meeting, have something to offer them. A great value proposition, which is what you're talking about, Scott, better than they're getting now. A well-developed new approach to problems, something they haven't seen before. You talked earlier about making the switch from a phone company. You talked earlier about not paying for long distance anymore. That's a whole new approach to a problem that can totally change the way we do business. Look what we're doing now. We're finding new approaches to problems with the COVID, and we're trying to find new ways to do business. So everybody's involved in that. And then this is just what you're talking about, a C-level decision, something that can't be handled lower in the food chain. You've got to bring them a decision that can only be made in the C-suite. Otherwise, you're wasting their time, and they're gonna bump you down, and that's not always bad, right?
Right.
So if I talk to somebody in the C-suite about, you talked about office supplies, and they say, no, you should talk to Charlene. She handles all of our office supplies. When you call Charlene, you could say, yeah, Scott told me to call you. Well, now they're going to take the phone call. So sometimes starting at that C-suite and then getting bumped down is a great way to get the appointment directly, because you said, well, the CEO told me to talk to you, Charlene, and then Charlene's going to listen.
I mean, it's almost like the CEO deciding they're going to switch an outside CPA company and they don't talk to the CFO. That would be a very foolish decision to make.
Right.
However, if you're calling from a CPA company and you do talk to a CEO, they're going to refer you to the CFO. And if that happens, you can ask the CEO going, I really appreciate that, and I certainly understand you making that decision. Is it okay if I stay in touch with you periodically as to how that conversation is going?
Right.
And I'm sure the CEO is going to say, I'd love to know. Please do. Let me know how it goes. And then you can check in with the CEO. You still have that dotted line. You're still working with the CFO. You're going through all the process and what the expectations are. But you did get referred from the CEO. So there's a meaningful conversation that awaits you when you get referred by somebody higher up. But always maintain that dotted line to the person as high up in the organization as you can.
Scott, that's a whole nother area that we need to add to our list of topics, because there's not enough of that kind of communication back to the referrer, to the other people in the organization that need to know what's going on. We tend to get tunnel vision as salespeople. Oh, look, the CFO is going to make this decision, and we cut everyone out of the conversation and lose the opportunity for more and bigger sales in the future by showing how well we can converse and keep everybody in the loop.
Yeah, totally agree.
Any other things you want to say about the C-suite?
I think some things to keep in mind is you always want to be prepared to be brief, and it takes a lot of work to be brief. So you want to be concise. You don't want to waste their time. You want the C level to know that you really thought out what you're going to say, what you're going to offer, and the idea that you have. And if you're not brief and concise, and you're winging it, it's going to show, and they're going to know, well, this really wasn't that important.
Yeah, and if they stand up and say, well, and put their arm around your shoulder, it's time to go.
So always,
get out of there before they kick you out of there.
Yeah. So share the idea, and then I always like the end of a proposal is to let them to decide and just say, you know what, I just wanted to share this information with you. I wanted to tell you about how we worked with other companies. I want to share with you the outcome that they've received. And then you can decide if you want to pursue it or not. Right. They really feel in charge of making that decision. When the prospects feel in control, they don't feel pressure, then they're going to be able to either give you a reason or an excuse on why they're not doing it. So you've got an objection to handle, which is a buying sign, or they're going to proceed to the next step and you're one step closer to making a sale.
Yeah, the language I like to use in that is, how would you like me to follow up with you?
Yeah.
How do you want this to proceed? And they'll usually make a decision right there to say, we're not going to proceed. I want you to call me in 2 weeks. And I'll tell you that when you're in the C-suite, do what they suggest, do it the way they suggest, and keep on that professional level. But if they're going to make a decision, they're the type of people who can make decisions and will make them one way or the other. I very seldom find in the C-suite they leave me hanging. They're willing
Right.
to say, nope, we're not going to do this, or call us in 6 months, or we're not quite prepared, or you need to bring this person into the company. Whatever it is, they're willing to make a decision for that next step right away.
We've got some resources that we want to share with you to reinforce some of the content that we shared with you today. So you can go to the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. I'll have a blog on failure is one step closer to accomplishment. And Bill, I think you've got something on selling to the C-suite.
Selling to the C-suite, can't be closer title to that. So yeah, I got an article on that. This segment of the Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by Steve Kloida's great book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer. And the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
As we close the show today, I want to share with you the golden nugget. The quote of the week is from Winston Churchill. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts.
And he dealt with war and people dying and bombing.
Man.
And I mean,
we're dealing with,
we're dealing with, gosh, I feel bad when they tell me no.
Yeah. Imagine the decisions that he had to make and the ones that we make. So a lot more to risk when the decisions are life-threatening. Nobody died making cold calls.
That's right. That's right. It just, you get your feelings hurt. And if you can't deal with getting your feelings hurt, you shouldn't be in sales. You've got to figure out how to do that. I just can't overestimate the value of persistence. You talked about it in getting to the C-suite. So that persistence questions comes up so often in prospecting. How many times should I call them before I stop? Mm-hmm. I say as many as it takes to get hold of them. You like 6 or 7, they'll tell me to stop. But if it's an important person, or, a lot of people only have maybe 700 contacts that they're responsible for. They've got a limited territory, a limited number of people. You can't afford to walk away from any of them. So be persistent. If they're an important potential customer, have the courage to continue. So our contact information, obviously, getinthedoorpodcast.com. My website is reachdev.com. All the information we talked about will be in the show notes, so look for it at getinthedoorpodcast.com.
Next week, we're going to cover Chapter 12 from the book, The Magic of Thinking Big. Use goals to help you grow. And we're going to have a special marketing guest on, Greg Pomerantz, who's going to talk about the difference between sales and marketing and how they work together and how sometimes they don't. So that'll be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. Have the courage this week to do something new and do something better.
Good selling.